In 2001, the gaming world was introduced to something darker, grittier, and far more cinematic than anything that had come before. Developed by Remedy Entertainment and published by Rockstar Games, Max Payne didn't just deliver intense gunfights. It delivered a tragedy wrapped in snow, shadows, and slow-motion gunfire. It was a game that felt like a hard-boiled crime novel brought to life, blending graphic novel panels, haunting narration, and revolutionary gameplay into a seamless noir experience. At the center of it all stood Max Payne, a man defined not by heroism, but by loss. A New York detective whose life shattered in a single, brutal night, Max became a symbol of vengeance carved from grief. His voice, cold, poetic, and dripping with metaphor, guided players through a city drowning in crime and corruption. Every alleyway felt dangerous. Every gunshot echoed with purpose. But Max Payne's story was never just about revenge. It was about trauma, about how pain lingers long after the smoke clears. Across 3 games, we witnessed the evolution of a man constantly at war. Not just with enemies in front of him, but with memories behind him. This is not the tale of a traditional hero. This is the chronicle of a survivor navigating a world that has already taken everything from him. Before the bloodshed and headlines, before he became New York's most wanted cop, Max Payne was just a man trying to balance duty and family. A rising detective in the NYPD, Max worked undercover cases against organized crime, believing he was making a difference in a city rotting from the inside. But on a cold winter night, everything he loved was taken from him. High on a new street drug called Valkyr, 3 junkies broke into his home. Under its influence, they were violent, erratic, and beyond reason. By the time Max arrived, it was too late. His wife and infant daughter were gone, murdered in the place that was meant to be safest. That moment became the fracture point of his life. Grief turned into rage. Rage turned into obsession. The case revealed that Valkyr wasn't just another narcotic circulating the streets. It was something bigger. Designed as part of a secret military experiment and later buried under corporate secrecy, the drug was leaking into the underworld, spreading chaos. Max transferred to the DEA and went deep undercover within the Punchinello crime family, determined to dismantle the operation from within. But the deeper he went, the more the lines blurred. Allies were killed. Trust evaporated. When his cover was blown, Max was framed for murder and branded a cop killer. Suddenly, both the mafia and the police were hunting him. Alone, armed, and with nothing left to lose, Max embraced the only thing that still made sense: revenge. Gunfights became ballets of violence. Time seemed to slow as bullets tore through the air, capturing the now iconic bullet time mechanic that defined Max Payne. But beneath the action was a man unraveling. His narration, soaked in metaphor and despair, revealed a psyche cracking under the weight of trauma. Every enemy he faced wasn't just another obstacle. It was another step deeper into the abyss. Chapter 1 of Max Payne's saga isn't about heroism. It's about transformation, the death of a detective and the birth of a vigilante shaped by grief. In losing everything, Max Payne became something else entirely, a man who would walk through hell if it meant someone else would pay. With the streets of New York painted in gun smoke and betrayal, Max Payne began to realize that his family's murder was not random chaos. It was collateral damage in something far more sinister. The drug Valkyr wasn't just poisoning addicts. It was the remnant of a buried military experiment, one designed to enhance soldiers but abandoned after catastrophic psychological side effects. As Max tore through the ranks of the Punchinello crime family, he uncovered fragments of a larger truth. Behind the mob stood corporate power. Behind the corporate veil stood Acer Corporation, a pharmaceutical giant with secrets worth killing for. At the center of it all was Nicole Horn, a calculating executive who had helped bury the Valkyr project's failures, along with the bodies tied to it. The drug had escaped containment, trickling into the criminal underworld, turning the city into a testing ground. But the deeper Max dug, the more unstable his own reality became. Haunted by guilt and trauma, he suffered vivid hallucinations, nightmarish sequences where blood-streaked hallways twisted into surreal mazes. The cries of his child echoed in darkness. These weren't just stylistic moments. They symbolized a mind deteriorating under grief and violence. Max wasn't just fighting enemies in abandoned warehouses and corporate towers. He was fighting his own unraveling sanity. The conspiracy tightened its grip as allies fell and truths surfaced. What began as revenge evolved into exposure. Max was no longer simply avenging his family. He was dismantling a system built on secrecy, greed, and human experimentation. Every step forward was soaked in moral ambiguity. He wasn't a hero saving the city. He was a wounded man dragging corruption into the light through sheer force of will. By the time he reached the heart of the conspiracy in Max Payne, Max understood one thing clearly. There would be no clean ending. No restoration of what was lost. Only confrontation. Only reckoning. The Valkyr conspiracy revealed that his tragedy was engineered by powerful hands, but it also gave him a target. And for a man with nothing left to lose, that was enough. 2 years after the Valkyr conspiracy was exposed, Max Payne returned to the NYPD, but he was no longer the same man. The snow still fell over New York, but the rage that once drove him had cooled into something heavier. Regret. Emptiness. The ghosts never left. They just grew quieter. In Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne, fate brought him face to face once again with Mona Sachs, the assassin he once pursued, and the only person who seemed to understand his pain. Mona was sharp, dangerous, and emotionally guarded. Yet beneath the surface she carried scars that mirrored Max's own. Their relationship wasn't built on trust or comfort. It was built on shared trauma. In each other, they found recognition, a reflection of loss. As a new conspiracy unfolded involving corrupt officials, contract killers, and secret alliances within the police force, Max was forced into another spiral of violence. This time, the threat wasn't just external, it was emotional. Loving Mona meant risking the last fragile piece of himself he had left. Every gunfight felt heavier. Every decision carried consequence. The narrative leaned deeper into tragic romance, echoing classic noir themes of doomed love and inevitable fate. Max often questioned whether he was cursed, whether anyone close to him was destined to suffer. The more he tried to protect Mona, the more danger surrounded them. Betrayals surfaced, loyalties fractured, and once again, bullets became the language of truth. By the end of this chapter, Max faced a painful realization. Survival does not guarantee happiness. Even when conspiracies collapse and enemies fall, some wounds never close. Whether through loss or sacrifice, love in Max Payne's world comes at a price. Chapter 3 is not just about action, it's about vulnerability. It shows a man who has mastered violence but still struggles with hope. In trying to outrun tragedy, Max learns that fate is relentless. And sometimes, the hardest battle isn't against the world. It's against the belief that you deserve something better. Years after the events of Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne is no longer a detective chasing justice through snow-covered streets. He's older. He's exhausted, addicted to painkillers and alcohol, drifting through life like a ghost with a gun. The cold noir of New York is replaced by the scorching heat of São Paulo in Max Payne 3. But the darkness inside him hasn't faded. It has only followed. Now working as private security for the wealthy Bronco family, Max hopes distance will bury the past. But trouble is drawn to him like gravity. When the family becomes entangled in a series of kidnappings tied to organized crime and corrupt paramilitary forces, Max is once again thrown into chaos. Only this time, he can't blame fate alone. His drinking, his recklessness, his inability to let go. They all play a part in the disaster that unfolds. Unlike the earlier chapters fueled purely by vengeance, this story is about accountability. Max begins to confront the possibility that he has been hiding behind his trauma. That pain became his excuse. That violence became his comfort. The bright lights and crowded streets of Brazil create a harsh contrast to his inner emptiness, highlighting how out of place he truly is. He's not a hero swooping in to save the day. He's a man trying to prove he can still do one thing right. As betrayals unravel and corruption within political and corporate systems surfaces, Max strips himself down to the basics. No more illusions of destiny. No more romanticized suffering. Just survival and a final attempt at redemption. The gunfights are sharper, more grounded, more brutal. Time still slows when bullets fly, but the poetry in his narration is tempered by brutal self-awareness. By the end of his journey in São Paulo, Max doesn't find happiness. He finds clarity. He cannot undo the past. He cannot resurrect the people he lost. But he can choose not to be defined entirely by his tragedy. The final chapter closes not with triumphant victory, but with something quieter: acceptance. After years of running from grief and drowning in guilt, Max Payne finally walks forward without looking back. Not healed, not whole, but finally free enough to keep going. Trivia's behind the pain. The original Max Payne used a unique storytelling method: graphic novel-style panels instead of traditional animated cutscenes. The developers staged photo shoots with real people, then stylized the images to create the noir comic aesthetic. The face of Max Payne in the first game was modeled after Sam Lake, the lead writer from Remedy Entertainment. His intense expression became one of the most recognizable looks in early 2000s gaming. The iconic bullet time mechanic was inspired by Hong Kong action cinema and films like The Matrix. It wasn't just a visual gimmick. It changed how players approached combat, encouraging stylish, cinematic movement instead of static shooting. The nightmare sequences in the first game, where Max walks through blood trails and distorted hallways, were intentionally designed to be disorienting, symbolizing his fractured mental state after his family's death. When Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne was released, its tone shifted heavily toward tragic romance, drawing comparisons to classic noir literature and even Shakespearean themes of doomed love. And nearly a decade later, Max Payne 3 was developed directly by rockstargames, marking a shift in visual style and tone, from comic book noir to a more grounded, cinematic realism. The series has sold millions of copies worldwide and is widely credited for influencing modern third-person shooters, especially in blending narrative depth with high-intensity action gameplay. In 2008, the franchise was adapted into a live-action film titled Max Payne, starring Mark Wahlberg as the troubled detective. While the film received mixed reviews, it cemented Max Payne's status as a pop culture icon beyond gaming. These behind-the-scenes details reveal that Max Payne wasn't just built on action. It was crafted with cinematic ambition, emotional depth, and a relentless commitment to atmosphere. From the snow-covered streets of New York to the sun-scorched chaos of Brazil, Max Payne has walked through fire, loss, addiction, and redemption. Across Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne, and Max Payne 3, we didn't just witness gunfights in slow motion. We witnessed the unraveling and rebuilding of a broken man. Max's story endures because it refuses to offer easy comfort. There is no perfect victory, no restored family, no clean slate, only scars carried forward. And yet, that is what makes his journey powerful. He survives, not because he is fearless, but because he has already faced the worst life could take from him. In the end, Max Payne's saga reminds us that time cannot be reversed. Even in bullet time, we can slow it down. We can relive moments in our minds, but we cannot change them. All we can do is step into the next moment and keep moving. And somewhere, in the echo of a distant gunshot and the quiet fall of rain, the legend of Max Payne still lingers, haunted, human, and unforgettable.